human rights advocate George Bizos spent much of his legal career at the Legal Resources Centre, where in fact he was a member and counsel to 40 lawyers. Now, he's remembered for representing families of apartheid atrocities at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and for leading the Legal Resource Centre team at the Marikana Commission, defending the families of slain victims. Now, his colleagues at the Legal Resource Centre are mourning the loss of a brilliant legal mind and a tireless campaigner for victims of injustice. I'm now joined for this now by National Director of the Legal Resources Centre, that's Nersan Govender. Nersan, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. In parts of your reflections as the Legal Resources Centre, you rightly note that George Bizos has played an enormous role in even fostering the legal profession of many people who've been in contact with the centre itself. Do you think we'll ever get to the point where we're able to fully quantify the scale of the impact that George Bizos has had on the legal fraternity?
Morning, Ayanda. It's an interesting question. I don't think anyone can actually quantify what George's contribution was to not only the Legal Resources Centre, but to this country.
Yeah, and perhaps we should reflect on ways through which he's at least contributed to the Legal Resources Centre. I mean, take us through some of the pivotal roles that he's been able to play during his time while interacting with the institution.
So, Ayanda, George spent the bulk of his career at the Legal Resources Centre. He was there for 30 years. And he was an active lawyer until about the age of 90, when he started to become a bit more frail. After that, he was still involved towards the latter part of his career in the Ahmed Timor matter. But I think what colleagues at the LRC will remember him for is his great humility and his ability to mentor, to coach, to teach young lawyers about social justice and defending the Constitution. And you would see many of those lawyers today, high-flying lawyers, high-powered lawyers that are still working in the sector that were mentored by George at the Legal Resources Centre.
And perhaps it's also an important time for us to reflect on how those individuals are paying it forward the way George did. Are you getting a sense that at least that part of his legacy is well and still alive, especially considering the work that the Legal Resources Centre is currently busy with, not least of which some of the evictions taking place in Cape Town?
Absolutely, and if you look at the recent cases from March during the lockdown in the country, one could see, I would use the word DNA rather than anything else. The DNA of the LRC, the DNA of George Bizos flows through the blood of colleagues at the LRC. And if you look at the way our young lawyers actually approached the eviction cases in Cape Town, particularly in Cape Town, it would show you that they are fearless in their fight and quest for justice of the downtrodden and especially the poor.
Yeah, you speak about fears, and I'm very interested to hone in on that if we can. George Bizos was a giant, a great tree, if you like, but certainly still a man nonetheless. Can you take us through perhaps some of his own fears within the legal fraternity, things he was concerned about, especially as we continue with some of the legal tussles that we're seeing in the country?
Fear, I'm not sure whether it would be fear, but his quest for justice, and if you look at his track record in the work that he did in all his career, whether it was the Legal Resources Centre or outside, he was one man that was fearless when he actually wanted to liberate the people of South Africa. He was part of a young group of lawyers that actually took on the Nationalist Party in 1948 when they came in. He was also fearlessly involved in the treason trial of Nelson Mandela and others. The Brown Fisher trial, also defending Winnie Mandela, the New South 5 Soweto trials, the Biko inquest, and it goes on and on and on. And I think the very last huge one that he did was defending the people in the Marikana Commission and lastly the Timor trial. So if you look at fear, no. If you look at justice, Absolutely.
You know, I've heard in some corners people saying that to be a great lawyer, you also have to be a great actor. Where do you think his greatest strength lied insofar as his legal profession is concerned? I don't imagine him being an actor, though, but I certainly wouldn't pass that by him.
Look, he's known for his theatrical appearances in court, and I think it served him well in his cases. And just as a side, and it's quite a humorous thing that he once mentioned that there was a movie made about him, and it was being filmed in Zimbabwe. And his name actually escapes me right now. The chap who played the Godfather. And he said he would have done a much better job playing himself than Marlon Brando. It's Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando actually portrayed George Bizos in the movie. And he actually said that I would have done a much better job playing myself than Marlon Brando. So that was the man.
Absolutely. A man who clearly had, you know, a side to him that was quite humorous, especially because the work that you do can be so taxing and really weigh quite heavily on the soul. Take us through how he's managed to keep his spirits up for, you know, according to you at least, until he was about 90 years, still fully practicing as a lawyer in human rights and you know, in his quest for justice, for lack of a better term.
You know, and the one thing that when you arrive at the LRC and you speak to colleagues, I mean, George is this giant. I mean, his reputation precedes anything. And, you know, I remember when I first met him as well, I was nervous coming into the LRC. And here was this man with absolute humility, welcomed you, spoke to you with humanity, with humbleness, no ego whatsoever. And I think there are a lot of people that can take that away from him. But the one thing that colleagues that worked with him, especially the advocates that worked with him at the LRC and other staff, something that was special. He had a vegetable garden, and he would make freshly prepared salads and bring it to lunch every day and spend time with the staff, talking to them. He had time for everybody. He wasn't this kind of person that was distant from what the colleagues have told me. I personally didn't spend a lot of time during his tenure at the NRC, but I met him towards the tail end of his career. But in my brief interchange with him, that's what I found as well.
Nersan Govender, thanks very much for coming through and sharing some of your sentiments and reflections on this great man. Certainly appreciate your time on the AM Report.